And now Stephen Richer, who just lost his election, who's on his way out, is giving everybody a big, fat, disgusting meal right on his way out. Here you go, eat this one, enjoy it. On September 7th, she ordered the MVD to work with the Secretary of State's office to address the programming interface error. Programming errors!
People who have not provided documented proof of citizenship are going to get a ballot in this election, and it will allow them to vote for president, U.S. Senate, and Congress.
Yes. 100,000 voters in Arizona are now stuck in a weird limbo, and there are some shenanigans afoot. You remember this guy, Stephen Richer. We've talked a lot about him. He was responsible for a lot of, in my opinion, what went wrong in 2022, when on the day of the election, we had a bunch of machines have problems and ballot problems, and Kari Lake lost that election, and there was just weird stuff. We covered it live here. We were monitoring where the problems were happening and how it affected the demographics and so on. But he was in office, and remember, he was there with Bill Onesie Twosie Gates. Bill Onesie Twosie Gates was like, we're like, hey, Bill, where are all the election results? Why are they taking so long to get them compiled so that we can, count the votes? And he said something like, well, we're just dotting the I's and crossing the T's, taking out some onesie and twosies, crossing everything off. We said, what the hell? Who is this guy? We don't even talk like that here in Arizona. What the hell's he doing? Embarrassing us. So anyways, these guys have been around for a long time. And Stephen Richer is not going to be in office anymore. Oh no. He says it's been a privilege. Elections have winners and losers, and I've lost. Good. Get someone else in there who's more fair. Now, he is posting this on X. He says, later today my office is suing the secretary's office as though this is adversarial. And a lot of this stuff is not. They are two people on the same side who are trying to get the same thing done, but they play like they're suing each other because everybody sees, oh, they're suing each other. That must mean that they're working against each other, when in reality, we'll see if that's the truth. Now, he's saying this is the basis of the suit. So this is our current county recorder suing the current secretary about how to handle certain voters who need to provide proof of documented citizenship. He says since 2004, Arizona has been the only state in the country to require that a voter provide documented proof of citizenship in order to vote for a full ballot. And remember, you can have a full ballot, which includes federal votes and state level votes. So state senators, state initiatives, right? All the other things you see when you go vote, they're all on there. But if it's a federal only ballot, then you're not getting any of that state stuff. It says for all other states, like Arizona's, unique, the registrant simply has to attest under penalty of law that he's a United States citizen, right? All you got to do is check the box. And we know that illegal aliens would never break the law or never check a box ever, because there's clearly no history of them breaking the law at all, like, crossing a border illegally or something. But since 1996, Arizona has also required that residents provide proof of citizenship in order to obtain most forms of driver's licenses. So accordingly, since 2004, the vast majority of voter registration applicants have satisfied their documented proof of citizenship requirements. So most people are citizens for purposes of having this proof on file with the MVD. That's our motor vehicle division. Other states call it the DMV. To confirm this, the voter registration simply runs a check with the MVD to make sure the voter got his license after 1996. So if the MVD started checking after 96 for citizenship to get a license, well, then we just say if they check, then we don't have to check. So do they have license with you? Great. In order to get a license, they're citizens. Great. So that's good. Now, unfortunately, the way the system was designed allowed for one group of voters to go through the cracks. Oh no. And they just discovered it right before this election. Weird. If a driver's license prior to 1996, driver got a license before that, but did not have a documented proof of citizenship on file, that could have happened. But then if he got a duplicate license, the issuance date would be updated in the statewide voter registration interface with the MVD. Then if a person went to registered, when the counties went to confirm that, the interface would yield a date after 1996, and they would say, yeah, he's got proof of citizenship because he's got a license after that date. And if he's got a license, we presume he's got citizenship. So this flaw has existed since 2004 in every county all across the state. All right, so we got a big bucket of people who are in this weird status where we don't actually know if they're citizens. So my office discovered this issue just last week. Oh, wow. And we have been working with the governor's office, which is Katie Hobbs, who was the secretary the last time our elections were rigged, and the secretary's office, a Democrat, and the MVD, and the attorney general to fix this moving forward, another Democrat, okay, Chris Mays, who's indicting all of the Trump electors, right? Okay, that's great. You're working with all these official people who everybody knows are partisan rigged hacks. So he says, okay, the number of people is 97,000 registrants across the state. Now, all of these people have attested under penalty of law that they're U.S. citizens. Now, in all likelihood, they are almost all all U.S. citizens. And they actually probably know, right, like who these people are and what kind of voters they are. And the question is, are these people who had these licenses way back in 1996, right before this was all in place, were those illegal aliens? Or are these actual citizens who are going to be disenfranchised here? And what kind of citizens? Are they Republican citizens or Democrat citizens? And why did they just discover this all of a sudden? And why is Katie Hobbs and the rest of the same people who we allege were responsible for rigging the last election, why are they all involved in the solution all of a sudden? And now Stephen Richer, who just lost his election, who's on his way out, is giving everybody a big, fat, disgusting meal right on his way out. Here you go. Eat this one. Enjoy it. So he's suing another friendly, Adrian Fontes. And remember, they all have an interest in disenfranchising the Republican voters on the state ballots, right? If there's a bunch of Republicans in this bucket and they can disenfranchise them, then they're not going to be voting on state issues. Could be 100,000 people that only can vote in federal elections. So all of these people have said that their citizenship is a little bit of a red herring, right? Now, they have not provided documented proof of citizenship. And so moving forward, everyone agrees that we need this. We need DPOC for those voters for them to be on a full ballot. But the secretary and I, Chris Mays, who's prosecuting Trump voters, no, she's the AG, Adrian Fontes, who's a Democrat, and I have different opinions on what the law requires. It's my position that these registrants do not have citizenship that's been documented under the law. And so therefore, they can only vote on the federal level, right? So they can only vote for president and I think Senate. But the secretary, Adrian Fontes, says, no, it's too close to the election to implement such a change and that it would be unduly burdensome on voters and it would deprive them of their voting rights. He's like, we're printing the ballots right now. So this guy says, we're going to court to get a clear answer, and he filed a lawsuit. And you can see why he might want them off, right? If he is an anti-Trump Republican type of person who's politically involved, then he might have a political animus here or not, right? Maybe he's just saying, no, I just want to bring this to everybody's attention. What's so interesting about this is that he discovered it right now. Their office just discovered it. And so Katie Hobbs, let's see what she said. She wrote a statement about this and said, after recorder Richer, the guy we just read, brought an erroneous voter registration record to my attention, my team identified and fixed this error that originated in 2004, and it affects longtime residents who've received the driver's license before 96. Now, as soon as I became aware of the problem, I directed the MVD to work with the secretary to aggressively develop and implement a solution. And out of an abundance of caution, I will be implementing an independent audit to ensure that MVD systems are functioning as necessary to support voter registration. I'm proud of the MVD for their hard work implementing a fix. Richer said, I appreciate Hobbs and their MVD to ensure all Arizona recorders are receiving reliable and up-to-date information. After my team noticed the MVD database inconsistencies, they just discovered this, the governor and the MVD acted swiftly to fix the statewide issue and maintain thorough communication. Here's the background. Beginning December 8, 2004, stuff we all read, MVD issues duplicate licenses. As soon as we discovered this, on September 7th, she ordered the MVD to work with the Secretary of State's office to address the programming interface error. Programming errors! The corrections have since been developed by the MVD, and the administrative error will be corrected pending final action by the Secretary of State. I don't trust these people at all. But it seems like what they're trying to do now is to disenfranchise about 100,000 people from the state ballot, okay, from the state level. Richer is saying, no, sorry, it's too late. You have to go. And the secretary is saying, well, no, my fake position is that it's too close to the election. So what can happen? Like, just like we saw back last time during the COVID era, where they would come to these fake settlement agreements and they would just, no, let's settle this. Okay, here's our agreement. This is what we'll do. And they sue each other in order to create an outcome that gives them a political benefit. Happened everywhere in 2020. And we'll see where this goes right now, but it's been filed and the Republican Party has jumped in on this. So here's what the Republicans are saying. Filed in the Arizona Supreme Court, you see that this is the filing. The original complaint was with Stephen Richer versus Adrian Fontes. So it's one government official who lost his election and is leaving versus the Secretary of State. This guy unequivocally does not like Trump. I mean, that's my interpretation of what he says, but has supported anti-insurrection causes and all sorts of things. Adrian Fontes is a through and through liberal, right? So they're playing patty cake with one another, but they hide it with this little versus sign. Oh, look, we're fighting with each other. They're like, oh no, don't hit me. No, stop. And then they settle and they come to bad terms that are bad for us. So here's the brief of the Republican Party. And remember, Richer is suing to get 100,000 people off of the state-only ballots. So the Republican Party says, hey, let us in. We represent 1.4 million registered voters. And this relief sought by Richer would violate state and federal law. His judgment flouts national voter registration laws that have specific procedures for removing ineligible voters from the voter rolls. Like, there's a process for this. You don't just get to take them off. off. Section 8 says that they should conduct regular voter list maintenance and figure this out, well before we're in the middle of an election. Beyond restricting the permissible basis for removing people, it also prohibits voter list maintenance at certain times, specifically including from now up until the election, right? He's just pulling this out of his booty. Oh, look what we found. 100,000 Republicans. We're going to try to get off the rolls. A state must complete any program, the purpose of which is to remove names not later than 90 days prior to the date of a general election. This period is known as the NVRA blackout period, and this year it began on August 7th. So notable for its absence from this permissible reason, right? There's no reason to remove people when it's government clerical errors, let alone colossal errors that are going to diminish the voting rights of 100,000 voters who are not going to be voting for their local school board or their corporation commissioner or whatever. Voters who have resided in Arizona for 3 decades or more and have never previously been notified of any issues with their registrations would now be informed that they cannot vote on a full ballot without first producing documentary proof of citizenship. So it's a little too late. Not only is a coding error on the part of a government agency an invalid reason for attempting to invalidate registering eligible voters, but the damage is compounded by the fact that this guy, Richer, is trying to do this during the blackout period when the removal is literally unlawful. And so he cannot get this relief here. And so if he does this, it's going to violate the U.S. Constitution. Remember, the Constitution gives us some tests. Weigh the character and the magnitude of the injury against the rights that are protected by the First and the 14th Amendment. And there's a severe burden that the government needs to meet when they're trying to rip away your right to vote. It is difficult to imagine a state action that would impose a more severe burden on the right to vote than abruptly informing an individual who's lived and voted in Arizona for decades and previously voted in all elections, both state and federal, that they must suddenly prove that they're a U.S. citizen in the handful of days that remain before Arizona's October 7th voter registration deadline, if they want to vote. And that assumes that the notice is provided and actually reaches people. For many, given the short amount of time that's available to provide notice before the election, Stephen Richards recorded proposed notice of the glitch that he just discovered. A lot of glitches this year. Google's having them. All of them are popping up all over the place. Weird. May never reach the voter. They may only discover it when they go to vote in person or they receive the federal only mail-in ballot, when it would be too late to cure the deficiency because the state goofed. Hence, strict scrutiny would apply here because you're going to diminish their right to vote. And so if you're going to do something that diminishes the right to vote, you better have a damn good reason to do it. Now, the government's compelling interest in this case is presumably the need to verify the citizenship status, and they're going to apply the test here. They say Stephen Richer, he admits that the administrative error that prompted this has existed since 2005. Okay, it's happened through 9 election cycles. Our most safe and secure elections are apparently not. There's problems in them. They don't have a good idea on who's a citizen or not, even though these people probably are, right? And very clearly are not the problematic people that we're talking about who have been coming across the border and then being registered, or there's questions about whether this is happening or not, right? That's not exactly the category we're talking about. These are from 1996. But the point is, they still don't have all of the control that they claim they have. Now, it demonstrates that the state's interest is insufficiently compelling, right? Don't act like this is an emergency because you've been allowing this to go on forever. So now you want to suddenly disenfranchise people? And furthermore, it doesn't make it necessary to burden those voting rights now. If requiring proof of citizenship for people who've held a valid license and they have since before 1996 was not deemed necessary for them to vote in 06, 08, 12, and so on, then it's likewise insufficiently compelling to abruptly require it on the eve of the deadline to vote now. And finally, it's not narrowly tailored to demand that the voters take immediate action and rectify this right now. The fault is with the government. If this court grants this declaratory judgment, almost 100,000 Arizonans will be prevented from voting on a full ballot. It's difficult to imagine a remedy that would sweep more broadly than that. Now, the requested relief would also violate the due process clause. And you can imagine if the Arizona GOP is jumping in on this, right, if they're filing this amicus brief, they know that those are Republicans. It's not the DNC who is filing on this to stop the Republicans from doing this. The RNC is. And Stephen Richer, who is, in my opinion, a fake Republican, he claims he's a Republican, but then, does stuff like this. He's trying to get these people off the state ballots. The GOP is trying to keep them on. So you can basically identify who those voters are. So they also say, if 100,000 longtime Arizonans are prevented from voting this year solely due to a state administrative error that's gone unnoticed for almost 20 years, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, look what we found, then the federal due process rights of everyone affected would be violated. The 14th Amendment provides that you cannot deprive people of liberty without due process of law. Voting is part of that. And just having him unilaterally just delete people in the run-up to the election is inappropriate. criteria. The right to vote is fundamental, and the risk of depriving people of that fundamental right is very high, is extremely and unforgivably high. We're talking about 100,000 people here, and it's come up a mere 3 days before the Uokava ballots are set to be mailed to voters. Now, although the current situation is instigated by the discovery of a lawful permanent resident with an Arizona's driver's license, so they said, we found an Arizona driver who's not a citizen that has a license, Petitioner Richer concedes most of these voters are likely U.S. citizens, right? Meaning that there are more likely false negatives in there. So U.S. citizens are there rather than true positives who would be non-citizens. Now, that admission is crucial here. Procedural due process means that even if there's a risk of error inherent in there, we got to consider that. Now, he admits that the generality of these cases, if we go forward with this, it will erroneously diminish the voting rights of people who are in fact citizens. It's clear. Some people will show up to vote and they'll get a half ballot, disenfranchised. They say, finally, at a minimum, the due process clause requires that the deprivation of a liberty interest, in this case would be the right to vote, comes with hearing and notice. You don't just rip somebody's right to vote away. You got to provide them notice of that. That's the process. But Richer has properly expressed concern that whatever notice is provided is insufficient. He even knows this. So he issued guidance to county recorders ordering that they permit the affected voters to participate in all elections this year and verify voter eligibility later. So he's saying, okay, count them now, but we're going to try to disqualify them later, I guess. So unlike in most due process cases, the government here would not be forced to shoulder any additional administrative burden if you took our position. They want to impose additional costs. They want to interfere with all this right in the middle of the busiest part of the election season. They want to invalidate tens of thousands of valid voter registrations in the weeks leading up to the presidential election. The due process clause does not require or permit this result to happen. And it would also violate Arizona and our free and equal elections clause. Arizona Constitution says all elections shall be free and equal, and no power shall at any time interfere to prevent the free exercise of the right of suffrage. Now, it must be read to apply to citizens. Now, each of the affected voters currently have the right of suffrage, and they've exercised that for decades. But here, Richer seeks to interfere with the free exercise of that in an 11th hour demand for proof of citizenship suddenly. If it had acted competently, if he would have looked into this a long time ago, he could have identified it back in 2005. That relief violates the Arizona Constitution for the same reasons as it does under the Constitution. And if for no other reason, the requested relief should be denied because court orders that affect elections can themselves result in voter confusion. Given the proximity to this election, it is less likely that voters will stay home than they will show up to vote without knowing that there's a problem with their registration. In other words, U.S. citizen voters who have lived in Arizona for decades and consistently participated in state elections without an issue are likely to show up at their polling place only to learn that they've been disenfranchised by a state government bureaucrat of which they had no prior knowledge. And confidence in the integrity in our election process is fundamental to our participatory democracy. And so if you allow this to happen, people show up, they're like, what the heck is this? Where's our school board person? That would undermine that confidence. And so for the foregoing reasons, the court should decline to grant Stephen Richards' request to disenfranchise 100,000 American or Arizonans from the ballot, signed by Andrew Gould. So we have the Arizona GOP chair, Gina Swoboda. She's breaking down this error. I want to share with you a little bit of the beginning of it from a whiteboard update with Gina Swoboda.
This is Gina Swoboda, chairwoman of the Republican Party of Arizona, and we have a very important breaking update. This concerns voter registration rolls here in the state of Arizona. We have an issue. I'm going to tell you what the issue is. I'm going to tell you what my position is as the chair of the Republican Party of Arizona in addressing this issue. And I'm going to tell you why I'm going to do it this way. So the state of the law in the state of Arizona is that if you got your driver's license before October of 1996 and you registered to vote before 2004, you were grandfathered in as a voter and you did not have to go and provide documented proof of citizenship. Why is that, right? We know, we've talked before. Go to YouTube, go to our many videos, put in AZGOP on YouTube. In October of 1996, our motor vehicle department in Arizona started having digital signatures on your driver's license, okay? And before that, I still have my old driver's license, which I got in 1995. It was just your regular signature. There was no digital image of your signature. So that's where this first date comes from. So if you had a driver's license that was before October of 96, where we didn't have a digital signature on file for you, and we did not automatically keep track of whether or not you were a citizen, you're in this bucket here, okay? Then the next bucket is you registered to vote prior to 2004. Why is this date important? Because 2004 is when the voters of Arizona passed Prop 200, which required that in order to register to vote, you had to provide documented requested proof of citizenship. So when that went into effect, what the voters voted on, the voters agreed that, hey, anyone who has a driver's license from before October 96 or who registered to vote before 2004, you got grandfathered in to our system as a full ballot voter. So you may have shown proof of citizenship. We don't know that because we weren't keeping digital records prior to October of 1996 that would have given you, like, we have an F-type license. If you go get a license in Arizona and you don't show proof of citizenship, you get an F-type license. And so we know you're not a citizen. That didn't exist at this point. And then before 2004, you were not required to prove citizenship in Arizona when you registered to vote. So as part of that ballot measure that the voters voted on, we agreed, the voters voted to take this group of people and grandfather them in. They're going to still get a full ballot. If you go register today, get that state form, you don't provide proof of citizenship, you don't get registered at all. Go register to vote today, you fill in a federal form, what are you? Or a federal only voter. Why is that? Supreme Court of the United States says so. Until we get back there, that's why. What does it mean to be a fed only voter? You only see federal races on the ballot. You see president and vice president, you see Senate, and you see Congress. What don't you see? Don't see any state races, don't see any, that means the legislature's not on there, your county offices aren't on there, and your ballot measures aren't on there. The only thing that's going to be on there if you're a federal only voter is federal races. So that's where we were, that's how it worked. But there's been a snafu. So what happened here? We were informed today, so the governor's office held a call with the leaders of the legislature and with the Secretary of State, and there are articles out there, go right now out there, I don't want any of our particular media, Vote Beat by Jen Field has an article, Washington Post has an article, Axios has an article, it's all over the place right now. You can go see the breakdown of this, but I'm going to tell you the breakdown. So what has happened is, the motor vehicle department, when you change something on your driver's license record, they were changing the issue date of when your license was issued, right? So if the system was set up so that those who had an issue date
got a new license
prior to October of 96 did not have to provide proof of citizenship, they registered prior to 2004, so it wasn't required, and their driver's license was before October of 1996, that's a finite group of people. But here's what happened at motor vehicle. They started changing the issue date of your driver's license when you updated it, right? So people now who got a license pre-96, right, but registered after 2004, so you registered to vote after it was a requirement for you to provide proof of citizenship, they were getting a full ballot. That's what's happened. So we have a group of people who were registered as a full ballot voter and potentially should have been a federal only voter. We're all on the same page. The reason this happened is that motor vehicle, the flag that was tied to the issue date of your driver's license, when you changed your driver's license, the date changed, and when the date changed, they automatically took you out of this bucket. So people that should have potentially provided proof of citizenship were not asked to do so, and they got a full ballot. Okay, so that's where we are right now. We learned this morning as I'm talking to you.
Okay, and as a separate point, we're not even talking about the bucket of people who are just getting federal only ballots, right? Come in, I don't have proof of citizenship, don't care about proof of citizenship, don't want a full ballot, happy to get a federal ballot. The proof of citizenship is required for the state races, not the federal races.
So let's talk about who these voters are, and then I'll tell you my position on what we're going to do. There are 97,841 voters in the bucket. I don't have the query, the SQL database query that is being used, and the numbers are changing on us. At one point, they said there were 66,000 Republicans out of 99,000 people. Now this is the latest information that I have, but they're not giving me, hey, Gina, here's the SQL query we used on the database to figure out how many voters there are. So I'm going to tell you the numbers I was given because that's all I can tell you. 36,507 Republicans, 26,857 Democrats, 28,561 PND, party not designated. Then that also says other. I'm not sure why, because there's yet another other. The other is 15,013 for a total of 97,841 voters are in this bucket. So as I'm talking to you, everyone needs to be clear. The UOCAVA ballots, the military ballots, the civilian overseas ballots are getting mailed out by Maricopa County Thursday of this week. Early voting starts here in Arizona in 21 days, okay? So here's what would have to happen for these 97,841 people to be okay and not become confused and not suddenly have their ballot change on them. They have no idea that this has happened to them.
Right.
The county recorders would have to issue a notice in the mail. Remember, we don't have phone numbers on everybody. We don't have emails on everybody, okay? So they're gonna have to send a notice in the mail that's gonna have to get to the 97,841 people and say, hey, we had a mix-up at the motor vehicle office and you need to come in and show us your proof of citizenship. Otherwise, we're gonna change you.
Great job.
You've always had a full ballot, but now, for example, you 36,507 Republican voters, or now you 28,561 party not designated voters, you're gonna have to go find your proof of citizenship and bring it to us so that we can adjust your voter registration. Here's my position on that, okay? That's not fair to the voters. We are within the 90-day NVRA, National Voter Registration Act, NVRA, we've talked about it before. That is a federal law that talks about the ways in which states are permitted to do voter list maintenance. I hope you all know, and if you don't know, you're about to know. I love the voter rolls. I love voter list maintenance. When I'm not your chair, which I'm very proud to be, I help run an organization that is dedicated to preserving the integrity of the voter rolls by making them available to the public, so the public can do oversight under the NVRA. But there's a very important part of the NVRA, which is the law, as I'm standing here talking, and that is safe harbor, okay? Safe harbor is 90 days before an election. No county clerk, county recorder, county registrar, whatever they're called, in whatever state they're in, doesn't matter, this is federal law. They are not permitted to do routine voter list maintenance within those 90 days. Why do we do that? I mean, Congress debated it. Congress came up with it. We may feel differently about it. We may think like that's crazy and we should make it 30 days or we should make it 60 days. But as I'm filming this video, it's the law under the NVRA that you don't do routine list maintenance. And that would include moving someone from active to inactive or from inactive to cancel. We don't do these normal routine things in that 90-day window because we don't want voters to be disenfranchised because it's too close to the election. That's why. You have the whole year of 2023. You had all of this time in 2024. You don't want to run right up to 90 days before and then start going, go to your grandpa's safety deposit box and you don't know where it is, to go and find your birth certificate, to go and make a copy, to go and bring it down there when you haven't even gotten the notice yet because you don't know anything's wrong. These 97,000, 98,000, if we round up, right? People have no idea there's anything wrong because this wasn't their fault. This was a mistake made by motor vehicle.
Our government, who
so
says our elections
this
are
is
perfect.
Not routine voter list maintenance because this is an actual issue that came up and only affected these people. Fair enough. Let's go to the second thing that I'm going to cite for you, and that is the Purcell Principle. What is the Purcell Principle? The Purcell Principle is named after Helen Purcell, who was our county recorder in Maricopa for over 25 years, and it's from SCOTUS. It's from the Supreme Court of the United States. And the point of the Purcell Principle is not to change anything about the voting process when you get too close to an election, because again, you are invariably going to cause confusion for people. I want to make something super abundantly 100% clear. Please hear me when I say this. No matter what happens with this issue or how this issue is resolved, people who have not provided documented proof of citizenship are going to get a ballot in this election, and it will allow them to vote for president, U.S. Senate, and Congress.
Yes.
So whatever happens with this, the only decision we're making, we're not going to go, oh yes, give them a federal only ballot and they haven't provided citizenship. They're going to get a federal only ballot. The question is, are we going to stop these 36,507 Republicans or these 26,857 Democrats or these 28,000 PNVs or these 15,000 others? Are we going to stop 97,841 people from being able to vote for the legislature and for the county offices and for their local city council races and for their school board races and for the ballot measures?
Yes, all of that.
That's what we're talking about. No matter what we do or don't do, they're still going to get a federal only ballot and be able to vote in the federal only race. We're talking about our people who have been given, the 36,000 Republicans here, who have no idea that something's gone wrong at motor vehicle, who for all we know actually gave the right documents. We don't know. There are notes in some of them. We can't tell. So these people have always gotten a full ballot, and then they're going to get their ballot in the mail in 20 days. And what's going to happen? I'm going to open my ballot. Let's say I don't get the postcard. Let's say I'm traveling. Let's say I am, as we talk about, right? I am Jack and I'm traveling and I signed up. We talked in our last video about signing up for a one-time absentee ballot, and they mail me the ballot and I open it up and all of my races are gone. Where is my school board? Where is my county? Where are my ballot measures? Perhaps Jack is very passionate and he's against ranked choice voting. Perhaps Sally, his lovely bride, is very passionate and wants to vote against the abortion amendment to the Constitution. Well, Jack.
Perfect. That's exactly what Stephen Richer and that side of the state contingent want. And they're going to say it's done on the back of proof of citizenship. So this was a great report from Gina Swoboda over from the Republican Party of Arizona. And as we saw, as we heard her explain, you are still going to get a federal ballot in Arizona if you do not provide citizenship. Okay, they always say that, and you have to check a box, and the box is under penalty of perjury and all the stuff. Okay, but even people who've been residents for decades, who've been living here, been voting in many other elections, right? Even now they're saying, well, maybe we're going to kick them off the ballot and we're going to give them federal only races. So there are problems everywhere. These people every year, Stephen Richer's the guy who came out after Kerry Lake lost and after 2022 when Arizona flipped for Joe Biden, the guy that came out and said everything is safe and secure with Bill 1Z2Z. Nothing went wrong. All our systems are amazing. We have no illegals voting and all the things. It's all just propaganda from their disgusting, corrupt, bureaucratic agencies that they use to maintain their power. So now Richer is going to be working with Katie Hobbs and Chris Mays on a solution. Great for that. All right. So we're going to be here, obviously, continuing to cover this, what's happening in Arizona and the other swing states. Thanks, my friends, for subscribing and joining us as we do.